Hello, college football fans, and welcome to the SEC. Yesterday and today, I'm your host, Bert LaCroix, and I'm flying solo again this week. No special guest. When we have some really huge conference games, such as LSU and Georgia coming up very soon, we'll have a guest on from one or both of those schools. But today, once again, as it was last week, you've got me, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of some of the rivalries, some of the games that are being played this weekend in college football, some of the most important games in those series, and we'll take a look at the conference overall, the standings and so forth, and we'll make our predictions for this Saturday. So let's get into it right away. One of the games that is being played this Saturday at Jerry World in Dallas is Arkansas and Texas A&M. This has become a tradition now. They've scheduled that game in Dallas on a regular basis. Arkansas and A&M have a history outside of just being in the same division since 2012 when A&M joined the conference. They played each other in the old Southwest Conference, and if you'll remember, and there were some memorable games played in that series. Arkansas leads that series, 41 wins, 30 for A&M, and 3 have ended in a tie. 1975 was a huge and enormous game in that series. Texas A&M was undefeated and ranked number 2 in the country. They were going into the final game of the season against Arkansas, and they would clinch the Southwest Conference title and play for the national championship in the Cotton Bowl if they defeated Arkansas. You know what happened? Arkansas walloped Texas A&M 31-6. They went to the Cotton Bowl and they beat the Georgia Bulldogs from the SEC, oddly enough, soundly like they did Texas A&M. They defeated Georgia 31-10 in that game in 1975. Florida's going to Mississippi State this weekend, and we'll talk about that as we will all of the other games shortly. But a brief history. In 1992, Steve Spurrier was in his 3rd year as Florida head coach, and they had had great success under him. And they went on to play in the SEC championship against the University of Alabama, the first SEC championship game to ever be played. That was 1992, Alabama from the West and Florida from the East. And if you'll remember, Alabama returned an interception late and defeated Florida in that first SEC championship game, which was then played in Birmingham. And people got wise and moved the thing to Atlanta, which was a great move. And it's been a tremendous game over the years, much of the time. But anyway, back to 1992 and Florida versus Mississippi State in Starkville on a Thursday night. Florida was a heavy favorite. They were ranked number 13. And again, what happened? They went in there on a Thursday night, and Mississippi State was playing lights out. Jackie Sherrill was the coach of Mississippi State at that time, and State walloped the Gators by a familiar score of 30-6, 31-6. We mentioned that Arkansas game over A&M in 1975 that led to the Cotton Bowl. 30-6, Mississippi State over Florida in 1992 in Starkville on a Thursday night, and it was the largest margin of victory for Mississippi State in the history of that series between the two teams. Okay, Georgia is playing Tennessee this weekend, and in the past it's been one of those games. It's been very important toward deciding who's going to win the SEC East. Great tradition in that series. UT, the University of Tennessee, the Vols lead the series actually over Georgia. Georgia's had the best of it lately, mostly, but Tennessee does lead the series 23-22 and 2 ties. This game was only played 21 times from 1899 to 1989. The two teams did not play on a regular basis, but of course they went to divisions. These two teams wound up in the same division, and they've played regularly ever since, and there have been some great ball games there. Of course, Auburn didn't get into the SEC East like it figured they would, having at least they would now, since Missouri and Texas A&M especially came into the conference in 2012. It would make more sense now, but that hasn't happened yet, and I don't know if it will. And I'm getting sidetracked, but anyway, Florida and Tennessee used to be regular rivals of Auburn, as did Kentucky from the East, year in and year out. I do miss those games, but Auburn lands in the West in the toughest division in college football. That's all right. We were doing pretty well. But in going back to 1980, we're not going to talk about one of the games that's occurred since 1992. And we'll go back to 1980. And if you'll remember in this Georgia and Tennessee series, 1980 was the year that the Georgia Bulldogs won the national championship under their second one. And this one was under Vince Dooley. Herschel Walker was a freshman. George Rogers from South Carolina, who was not in the SEC at that time, did defeat Herschel for the Heisman Trophy. I suppose it was fair, but many people thought Herschel should have won. This is one of the games, this game really put Herschel Walker on the map. In 1980, Georgia was playing at Tennessee, and they trailed 15-0 early, and Herschel Walker had started the game, oddly enough, on the bench. But anyway, Herschel came into the game and got some playing time, and trailing 15-0, Herschel led Georgia to a 16-15 win, and Larry Munson's call of one of Herschel Walker's touchdown runs as he ran over Tennessee volunteers, trampled them on his way to the end zone, is one of Munson's most famous. But again, Georgia coming back to defeat Tennessee in Knoxville 16-15 after trailing 15-0, and you know the rest of the story. And another big series being played this weekend, a Western Division rivalry that goes way back. LSU and Ole Miss, and you might be thinking about the game that I have chosen to highlight in this series, 1959. In 1958, LSU had won the national championship. They had a 10-0 regular season. They won the national championship under Coach Paul Dietzel, and Billy Cannon, of course, was their famous running back at that time. Well, they came into this game, LSU and Ole Miss. LSU ranked number 2 in the country, and Ole Miss ranked number 3. A huge game played on Halloween night in 1959. And that was the year that Billy Cannon ran the 89-yard touchdown on a punt return with LSU trailing 3-0 when that occurred. It was about 10 minutes left in the game. From what I remember, Cannon took the ball deep in his own territory, of course, on his own 11-yard line, and zigzagged up the field. It seemed like every Ole Miss player put a hand on Cannon during that run, but nobody could bring him down, and LSU won the ball game. And they did not go on to win the national championship again that year, according to a friend that was the trainer on that LSU team in 1959. He said it didn't have the chemistry. Egos got in the way in 59. They didn't have everything that they had in such a wonderful way in 58 and 59. They had a great season, but it was not a national championship season or even an SEC championship season from what I remember. Ole Miss, one thing that is not brought out a lot in the history of this game, I think a lot of people, and particularly if you're a fan of the Southeastern Conference, obviously remember the 89-yard punt return by Cannon, but Ole Miss got the ball back and took it to the 2-yard line of LSU with 18 seconds left in the game, and they were stopped at the 1-yard line, and the victory was preserved for the LSU Bayou Bengals on Halloween night in 1959. Now, let's move on to the present. The SEC yesterday and today. Well, we're going to look a little bit at yesterday just through the rest of the season that has, as it has come to pass at this point. Let's take a look at standings. Georgia is 4-0 overall, and they stand atop the East with a 2-0 conference record. The Kentucky Wildcats, surprisingly, also have a 2-0 record and are 4-0 as well overall. So Georgia and Kentucky 1-2 in the East. Florida is 1-1 in the conference with a 3-1 overall record. South Carolina is also 1-1 with a 2-1 overall record. Missouri 0-1 in the conference, but 3-1 overall. Tennessee 0-1, 2-2 overall, and Vanderbilt 0-1 in the conference, 2-2 overall. We go to the SEC West. Surprise, surprise, surprise. The University of Alabama, the juggernaut, with a conference record of 2-0 overall. Bama is 4-0. LSU 1-0 in the conference with that upset win in Auburn. They are 4-0 as well in the conference. I'm sorry, overall. Auburn 1-1 in the conference, 3-1 overall. Mississippi State 0-1 in the conference with that loss in Lexington to Kentucky, and they are 3-1 overall. Of course, the big game with Florida coming up in Starkville Saturday. Ole Miss 0-1 in the conference, 3-1 overall. Texas A&M 0-1 in the conference, 2-2 overall. And the Arkansas Razorbacks are also 0-1 in the SEC and 1-3 overall. So like we thought at the first of the season, Bama is leading the West, Georgia's leading the East. That figure's not to change, but maybe Kentucky will have something to say about that. We'll see what it's going to happen with LSU, and maybe our Auburn Tigers are going to make a little noise after not a great showing, a very sloppy, out-of-sync game with Arkansas last Saturday night on the Plains. And now, let's get right down to that. Let's make some predictions for the games coming up this weekend. And we'll give you the game, the location, the line, the betting line, and what we think. May not give you scores on these games, but we'll pick a winner, and we may pick a few against the spread just for the fun of it today. So today, let's go starting with the games as they will be in the order that they will be played and not alphabetically. The first game of the day is going to be at 12 noon Eastern Time. There are two games being played at 12 noon Eastern Time in the SEC. The University of Louisiana Lafayette goes to Tuscaloosa to play the University of Alabama, and that's not going to be close. We know that. Bama's a 48, 49-point favorite, depending on who you're looking at, who the odds makers are. Bama's going to whomp the University of Louisiana Lafayette. They may score in the 50s. I don't expect Louisiana Lafayette to score any points possibly. They might get 3. They might get a field goal, a couple of field goals, a touchdown, but that would be about it. You're looking at probably 50 or 60 to 6 or 7, something like that. But that should be very exciting. Yeah, I'm being sarcastic. Anyway, we expect Alabama to win, and they will. Now, the fans from Old Dominion might take issue with that, as if you follow college football a little bit closely, you'll know that Old Dominion defeated Virginia Tech last week, of a good Virginia Tech team that was highly ranked, and it was a 49-35 win. They moved the ball at will against Virginia Tech and Bud Foster's defense, and I don't know how it happened. Nobody else knows, but they just got whipped. Virginia Tech did, and so that's a little aside for the Atlantic Coast Conference and Old Dominion. But let's get back on track to the SEC. The other game being played at 12 noon, the Arkansas Razorbacks, we mentioned, will travel to Dallas, Texas, and Jerry World to take on the Texas A&M Aggies at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. I don't think this is going to be a good ball game either. Arkansas did some things. I think they kind of knew what Auburn was going to do, and they had people in place to stop Auburn's run, and they did it with a little bit of help from Auburn's offensive line, scheming, play calling. A lot of factors went into Auburn's sloppy showing on Saturday night, but Arkansas did have something to do with it, and they may continue to improve throughout the year under Coach Chad Morris, but they're not going to beat A&M. I do not think they will on Saturday. A&M is, a 21-point favorite, and that might be about how it winds up, 28-7, 35-7, 35-10, something like that. It could be worse. A&M could score a lot of points. They could score in the 40s or 50s. We'll see. But I think they will win handily, and they will cover the line, probably. We move on down to the 3:30 feature game on CBS. 3:30 Eastern Time. The Tennessee Volunteers go to Athens to play the Georgia Bulldogs. And Georgia, a heavy favorite in this one. When have you ever heard a line in the Georgia-Tennessee game like this? Georgia is favored somewhere in the neighborhood of 32 and a half points over the University of Tennessee. When has that ever happened? Well, it has not. And they very well may cover too. Georgia should win the game. They should win handily. Jeremy Pruitt has got his hands full, just like Chad Morris does at Arkansas. Jeremy Pruitt has his hands really full up in Knoxville, and it's going to take time, just like it is in Fayetteville. But not a win, not a conference win for the Volunteers this week, and it's not going to be like that Herschel game at 16-15 in 1980. Georgia wins going away in Athens. The 4 o'clock game on the SEC network, the 4 o'clock Eastern game, takes us once again to the plains of Auburn, where the University of Southern Miss Golden Eagles will come flying in, hoping to upset Auburn. And if we think back about what Old Dominion did, that's not beyond the realm of possibility. I do not expect it to happen. Auburn is a 27-point favorite. I think there's a good chance they cover, but I would not be surprised at all if they don't. But I do think Auburn wins, and they win by a minimum of like 3 touchdowns, but maybe not the 27. It would be good to see Auburn's offense get in sync, to be able to run the football, to be able to throw the ball vertically down the field, mix it up. The great majority of Auburn's passes come within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, just like they were doing for Jeremy Johnson a few years ago when he was in the game, quarterbacking and trying to play it safe. But in my opinion, it's been a little too conservative. They're going to have to stretch the field vertically. Jarrett Stidham is going to have to see the open receivers and not take a sack or throw an interception. We hope that Auburn is synced up a little bit more, that Nick Brahms is doing better at center. He graded very well, as a matter of fact. The offensive line as a whole, though, if several guys were in sync, if 5 people were doing the right thing, sometimes the 6th guy or 4 were doing the right thing, sometimes the 5th guy on the offensive line missed a block, missed an assignment, and Arkansas was able to throttle Auburn's rushing attack by and large. Also, Booby Whitlow didn't run the ball but 13 times and touch it once through the air. He's got to touch the ball more. It looks like Auburn's going to have to get back to Gus's bell cow system, make Whitlow the bell cow, and mix it up a little bit with some power sweeps with Sean Shivers and Cam Martin, maybe target Martin out of the backfield. He doesn't seem to be finding his running lanes to be able to break one out, and Cam Martin has some great breakaway speed and can take it to the house, but Auburn's going to have to mix it up. They're going to have to go back. J.B. Grimes is going to have to get that line in sync. Come on, J.B. Gus and Chip Lindsey are going to have to get a little more creative with the offensive game plan. Hopefully that will transpire this week, and Auburn defeats Southern Miss. I think they will. Tennessee State travels to Nashville, Tennessee to play the Vanderbilt Commodores. Tennessee State, that's an in-town rivalry, a Nashville in-town rivalry with Tennessee State also residing in the Athens of the South, as it is known in Nashville. So many great colleges, universities there in Music City. Tennessee State is a huge underdog. Vanderbilt should win, and they should win big. They've shown some promise this year. Of course, they got beaten last week by South Carolina pretty soundly, but they should get back on the winning track this week against Tennessee State. We move on down the line to 6 o'clock Eastern p.m. That game with Tennessee State and Vanderbilt also at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, as well as the Auburn game. We move to 6 o'clock Eastern Time. The Florida Gators, we mentioned, traveling to Mississippi State with a storyline. You know what I'm probably going to talk about. Dan Mullen, the winningest coach in Mississippi State Bulldog football history, travels back to Starkville to take on Joe Moorhead and his Mississippi State Bulldogs. It should be a thriller. Mississippi State got beaten pretty soundly up in Lexington. They hope to rebound, but Florida also defeated Tennessee by a large margin last week, so they looked a little bit better. But I don't know how much you can tell about Florida beating Tennessee. Tennessee very well may not win a conference game this year, and the Florida Gators may pick up a couple, but they're not going to do very well. This game is really close. Mississippi State is the underdog in this game, I do believe. Let me double check that for you before I stick my neck out on that. Anyway, I do think they are going to bounce back and win the football game. I think they are ready for this game. I think Moorhead's going to have them pumped up. They have lost. They want to rebound. They want to get back out there. They want to beat somebody. And the Florida Gators and Dan Mullen are going to provide all the inspiration and motivation that Mississippi State needs to pull out a really close one. But as far as the point spread goes, Once again, I am going to check on that and make sure. I've got State a 7 or 8 point favorite in that game. I don't think that they will. There we go. Thank you very much for being patient with me. State is a 7 or 8 point favorite in Starkville. I think that's pretty accurate. I do think they will win in a very, very close ball game, though. I think the Gators might cover in that one, but State bringing home the victory over Dan Mullen and the Florida Gators. Okay, 7:30 p.m. in the Southeastern Conference finds the South Carolina Gamecocks traveling to Lexington, Kentucky, like Mississippi State did, to play the University of Kentucky. This should be another really good ball game. Let's see. Kentucky, -1, 1.5, 2 points, depending on who you're using for your betting line on that one. And once again, lines are not necessarily a deadly accurate prediction of who's going to win the football game, but they are created to induce betting on both sides. Bookies want a lot of people, Vegas wants a lot of people to bet on South Carolina as well as Kentucky, and that 1 to 1.5 point spread for the Wildcats might induce that. I think the Cats are going to win. A lot of people are picking South Carolina as well as Florida. Those are trendy upsets. This would be a very, very minor upset, but I think the Cats are on a roll. Benny Snell's doing great. They're finding quarterback play. Their offense is explosive, and the defense is playing lights out. They throttled Mississippi State. So I think the Cats are on a roll. They've got a head of steam up. It's going to be tough, but I'm taking the Cats, and I'm taking them to cover Kentucky over South Carolina. Now, Mississippi, the Ole Miss Rebels, Ole Miss, LSU. We talked about the 1959 game, Billy Cannon and the punt return. Well, this game's going to be at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Ole Miss traveling to Baton Rouge, and I see LSU winning and winning big. LSU is like a 12-point favorite. Could it possibly be that low? Well, that's what I've got here. Well, I'd take them to cover. I don't know if I'd put the farm on it, but I think LSU will pound Ole Miss. Ole Miss can move the football. You know, they struggled last week. And even though they wound up scoring 40-something points, they can score. They allowed 35 points by Kent State or something like that. Anyway, they won pretty soundly in the end. But again, that defense is not what it should be. And LSU with Nick Brossette and also Joe Burrow at quarterback, Brossette running the ball. LSU's, I remember the old Chinese bandit defenses of Charlie McClendon, Paul Diesel. And I think they're going to show up and throttle Ole Miss, not allow him a lot of points, and score plenty of points as well. I expect the LSU Tigers to win and to cover. And let's see if we've got any other games on our schedule. I'm going to look at my SEC 2018 football schedule grid style here and run down the games that are going to be played Saturday and see if we missed anything. And I do not believe we did. We have covered them all. So there you have it. I wouldn't take it to the bank. Who knows in this crazy game of college football? But there are some big games, not what they were in the past, possibly by the rivalries that I spoke to on the yesterday portion of the program, but some good ball games coming up this Saturday, and I wish you good luck to your team, your favorite team or teams, whoever that might be. Also, as always, we want you to be safe out there and be sure to love your neighbor. This has been Byrd LaCroix with the SEC Yesterday and Today, episode 18. You can find me on Twitter at Autull, AUTULL. My email address is byrdlacroix@yahoo.com, and you can find my writing and this podcast on Sports Hacks. It's available on iTunes, it's available on Apple, it's available on Stitcher, and many other sources of finding podcasts across the internet. But I would suggest you go to iTunes. If you have that, subscribe to it. It'll automatically dump into your computer, and you can just click and listen. And I think you'll find it enjoyable, and I think you'll find it informative as well. So the SEC Yesterday and Today, thanks again, and we'll see you next week.